I, Cassian, Alpha King of the Bloodmoon, reject you, Lisa, as my fated mate. The words hung in the icy air of the grand study, heavy with cruel finality. Cassian's jaw was locked, his golden eyes refusing to soften. He expected tears. He expected a desperate plea, a collapse onto the marble. Instead, Lisa simply stood there. The color drained from her cheeks as the mystical bond violently snapped, but her spine remained perfectly straight. She looked at him with a quiet, hollow clarity. I, Lisa, accept your rejection, Alpha Cassian. Her voice didn't tremble. She turned her back on him, her heels clicking against the floorboards. She didn't look back, and as the heavy oak doors shut behind her, the silence that followed felt terrifyingly permanent. The hallway outside the Alpha King's study was a cavern of polished stone and suffocating luxury. Lisa walked away from the heavy oak doors, her vision tunneling, her chest radiating a heat that felt dangerously close to a heart attack. The severing of a mate bond was said to be worse than death, a tearing of the soul that left the rejected hollowed out and gasping for air. She didn't gasp. She forced herself to inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4. It was a grounding technique her father had taught her when she was a child, long before he died in the border skirmishes defending the very king who had just discarded her. He did it, she thought, the reality settling over her like a heavy, suffocating blanket. He actually did it. For 6 months, the council had whispered. They had pointed at her lineage. A respectable warrior bloodline, certainly, but not royal, not ancient enough to sit beside the Alpha King who had just united the northern and eastern territories. Cassian needed a political alliance, a Luna, born of silver and silk, not a woman who knew how to wield a silver-forged blade better than she knew how to curtsy. Still, Cassian had sworn to her in the quiet hours of the night that the moon goddess's pairing was absolute, until today, until the political pressure cracked him. As Lisa descended the grand spiral staircase, the pack members milling about the foyer froze. Werewolves were deeply sensitive creatures, attuned to the unseen currents of pack dynamics. They could smell the sudden sharp scent of ozone and burnt sage, the olfactory signature of a shattered mate bond. Lisa, Sarah, a young Omega who worked in the kitchens, dropped a stack of linen napkins. Her eyes were wide, darting from Lisa's pale face to the empty staircase behind her. What happened to your scent? Lisa offered a small, brittle smile. I'll be leaving the estate, Sarah. Take care of the greenhouse for me, will you? She didn't wait for a response. She kept walking. She pushed through the heavy iron-wrought front doors and stepped out into the crisp autumn air. She didn't head to the Alpha's quarters to pack a dozen suitcases. She went straight to the barracks where she had lived before Cassian had moved her into the royal wing. Beneath the loose floorboard under her old cot, she retrieved a single duffel bag. It held her passport, human currency she had saved over the years, a change of practical clothes, and her father's hunting knife. She left behind the silk dresses Cassian had bought her. She left behind the diamond-encrusted Luna tiara that had sat on her dresser, mocking her for weeks. She took only what was hers before him. Back in the grand study, Cassian stood rigid by the window, his knuckles white as he gripped the velvet drapes. He watched the rain begin to fall over the sprawling estate. His chest ached, a dull, throbbing pain that he stubbornly attributed to the physical backlash of the rejection. It was temporary. It had to be. It's for the pack, he repeated to himself, the mantra tasting like ash on his tongue. The eastern wolves would never bow to a commoner. I need the Lycan princess. I need the alliance. The door behind him opened hesitantly. His beta Marcus stepped in. the heavy scent of distress rolling off him. Alpha, Marcus began, his voice tight. The psychic network is reeling. Did you? I rejected her, Cassian said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that offered no room for argument. It is done. The council will have their pure blood, Luna. Marcus swallowed hard. He had known Lisa since childhood. She's packing, Cassian. She's leaving the pack house. Let her cool off in the lower village, Cassian dismissed, turning back to his desk and pouring a heavy measure of amber whiskey into a crystal glass. She's hurt, she's throwing a tantrum. Give her a few days in the barracks, make sure she has enough provisions, and then I will set her up with a comfortable estate on the western border. She will be provided for. I am not a monster. Marcus stood in the doorway, staring at the broad, rigid back of his king. A cold knot formed in the beta's stomach. Cassian, Marcus said softly, dropping the formal title. She isn't going to the lower village. She didn't pack her clothes. She took her go bag. Cassian's hand froze halfway to his mouth, the whiskey catching the dim light of the study. His golden eyes flickered to the window, scanning the sprawling grounds below. What do you mean? I mean, Marcus said, the dread palpable in his tone. She's walking toward the boundary line, and she isn't looking back. The rain had escalated from a light drizzle to a punishing downpour by the time Lisa reached the edge of the Bloodmoon territory. The tree line here was dense, ancient pines towering like sentinels guarding the secrets of the pack. Beyond the tree line lay the human highway, a ribbon of asphalt that represented absolute severing. For a werewolf, the pack territory wasn't just land, it was an extension of their spirit. To cross the boundary line without the Alpha's blessing, without the intent to return, was to rip out one's own roots. It was an excruciating process that severed the telepathic pack link, plunging the wolf into complete, terrifying isolation. It was the birth of a rogue. Lisa stood in the mud, the cold rain plastering her dark hair to her cheeks. She could feel the pulsing, invisible barrier of the territory wards humming against her skin. It felt warm, inviting, begging her to turn around, to go back to the pack house, to beg Cassian to reconsider, to accept a lesser role just to stay near the man the universe had chosen for her. Her wolf whimpered in her mind, a pathetic dying sound. Mate, the beast cried out, clawing at the inside of her ribs. Go back to mate. He is not our mate anymore, Lisa whispered aloud, her voice barely carrying over the sound of the rain hitting the leaves. He chose power. We choose our dignity. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath of the pine-scented air, and stepped forward. The moment her boot crossed the invisible threshold, a sickening tear ripped through her consciousness. It was as if 1,000 silver hooks embedded in her brain were suddenly yanked out all at once. Lisa let out a choked gasp. Falling to her knees in the mud on the other side of the boundary, she clutched her head, her vision exploding with white-hot stars. The comforting hum of the pack, the distant, soothing presence of children laughing, warriors training, the steady heartbeat of her community snapped into a deafening, absolute silence. She was alone, truly, completely alone. She stayed on her knees for a long minute, letting the rain wash the mud from her jeans. Then slowly, with agonizing effort, she pushed herself up. She adjusted the strap of her duffel bag on her shoulder, turned toward the distant headlights of the human highway, and began to walk. Miles away in the heart of the estate, Cassian was mid-stride, walking down the grand hallway to intercept her at the gates. He had decided he would not let her leave the grounds. He would command her to stay in the guest wing. He was the king. He dictated the terms of their separation. Suddenly, a shockwave hit him with the force of a freight train. Cassian slammed into the stone wall of the corridor, a raw, primal roar tearing from his throat before he could stop it. His knees buckled, cracking the marble tiles beneath him. Fire lanced through his nervous system, pooling in his chest where the mate bond had once anchored him to the earth. "Alpha!" guards shouted, rushing toward him, but the sheer aura of dark, suffocating power radiating off Cassian threw them backward. His inner beast, usually a disciplined, terrifyingly calm force, violently seized control. His eyes flared a brilliant, blinding gold. His claws ripped through his leather boots and his hands elongated, slicing deep gouges into the ancient stone walls as he tried to anchor himself against the excruciating pain. "Mine!" His wolf roared inside his head, a sound so loud it caused a hairline fracture in his own skull. "She is gone! The thread is dead!" "She crossed the line," Cassian choked out, coughing, a speck of blood splattering onto the pristine floor. The telepathic tether that connected him to Lisa, the faint, shimmering silver string in his mind that he had ignored but always known was there, was gone, erased. He didn't care about the council in that moment. He didn't care about the Lycan princess arriving tomorrow. The primal, instinctual part of his brain recognized only one truth. He had severed a piece of his own soul, and his mate had just walked off the edge of the earth. Cassian forced himself upright, his breathing ragged, his chest heaving. The guards stared at him in pure terror. The Alpha King, known for his stoic, unbreakable composure, looked like a madman. "Marcus!" Cassian bellowed, his voice laced with the compelling power of the alpha tone, sending a tremor through the entire pack house. The beta materialized at the end of the hall within seconds, out of breath. "I felt it, Alpha. The whole pack felt it." She severed her pack tie. "Lock down the borders," Cassian snarled, his eyes completely taken over by his wolf. "Send the trackers. Bring her back. Do not touch her. Do not harm her, but bring her back to me now." "Cassian, you rejected her," Marcus said, taking a brave step forward, defying the crushing aura. "By ancient law, she is a free woman. If we drag her back across the boundary against her will after a royal rejection, it's an act of war against the goddess herself." Cassian grabbed Marcus by the collar, lifting the heavy-set beta entirely off the ground with one hand. "I don't care about the laws. Find her." He dropped his friend and turned, sprinting toward the eastern gates, leaving a trail of shattered marble in his wake. 10 days. It had been 10 days since Lisa walked out of the Bloodmoon territory. 10 days since the sun had shown its face over the packlands. A thick, unnatural layer of gray clouds had settled over the estate, matching the oppressive, suffocating mood that bled from the Alpha King and infected every single member of the pack. Crops in the southern quadrants were beginning to rot from the relentless drizzle. The warriors in the training yard were sluggish, snapping at each other, their inner wolves agitated by the chaotic, distressed energy radiating from the throne room. In a small, nameless human town nestled in the foothills of the Rockies, 300 miles away, Lisa wiped down the counter of Maggie's diner. The smell of stale coffee and frying bacon was a far cry from the roasted venison and delicate pastries of the royal kitchens, but she breathed it in like perfume. "Table 4 needs a refill, sweetie." Maggie, a plump, 60-year-old human woman with a heart of gold, called out from behind the grill. "On it," Lisa said, grabbing the glass carafe. She wore a simple white apron over jeans and a faded t-shirt. Her dark hair was tied in a messy bun. If anyone looked closely at her hands, they might notice the faint silvery scars webbing across her palms, the physical manifestation of a broken pack bond. But in the human world, no one looked closely. She was tired, her bones ached with a hollow emptiness that she knew would never fully go away. Sometimes in the dead of night she would wake up gasping, her hand reaching across the cheap motel mattress for a broad chest that wasn't there. But she didn't cry. Every day the pain became a little duller, a little more manageable. She was surviving. She was free of the politics, the whispering council members, and the man who had looked her in the eye and chosen a crown over her heart. Meanwhile, the king's crown was slipping. Cassian sat in his study. The room plunged into darkness. He hadn't turned on the lights in 3 days. The grand mahogany desk was covered in maps, scattered reports, and empty tumblers. The trackers had failed. Lisa was an expert huntsman. She knew exactly how to mask her scent, how to walk through streams, how to utilize human transportation systems that confused werewolf senses. She had vanished completely. The door creaked open, spilling a sliver of hallway light onto the floor. "Leave," Cassian growled from the shadows, his voice raspy. "I cannot, Your Majesty," came a smooth, velvet voice. Cassian looked up, his bloodshot eyes narrowing. It was Lord Silas, the head of the Alpha Council, the very man who had relentlessly pressured Cassian to reject Lisa. Silas stepped into the room, looking pristine in a tailored suit, seemingly immune to the depression crushing the rest of the pack. "The Lycan Princess Seraphina arrives in 2 days for the courtship ceremony," Silas said smoothly, ignoring the warning growl vibrating in Cassian's chest. "You have not attended a single preparation meeting. You look like a feral rogue, Cassian. This behavior is unbecoming of a king." "Get out of my sight, Silas," Cassian warned, the darkness in the room seeming to physically coil around him. "You did the right thing," Silas pressed, and stepping closer. "That mutt was not fit to be Luna. She accepted her place and left quietly. You should be relieved she didn't make a scene. Now you must fulfill your duty. You must bind yourself to Seraphina." Faster than human eyes could track, Cassian moved. He pinned Silas against the heavy oak door, his forearm pressing brutally against the elder's throat. Silas gasped, his eyes wide with genuine panic as he stared into the face of a king who had lost his mind. "Do not ever speak of her like that again," Cassian whispered, his breath hot and dangerous. "I severed my own mate to appease you parasites. I gave you your alliance. But if you push me right now, Silas, I will tear out your throat and mail it to the Lycan King myself." He released the elder, who slumped against the door, coughing and clutching his neck. "Get out!" Silas didn't hesitate, scrambling out of the study and slamming the door shut. Cassian stood alone, his chest heaving. The rage was a constant boiling pressure beneath his skin, masking the agonizing grief beneath it. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her standing there, perfectly straight, perfectly calm. "I, Lisa, accept your rejection." It haunted him. It infuriated him. She hadn't fought for him. He needed to feel her, just something of hers. Driven by a sudden, desperate urge, Cassian left his study and walked through the silent halls to the wing where Lisa used to stay. He entered her old room. It was perfectly clean. The maids hadn't touched it, yet it felt sterile. He walked over to the vanity mirror. Sitting in the center of the polished wood, illuminated by a single beam of moonlight breaking through the heavy clouds outside, was a small velvet box. Cassian's breath hitched. He reached out with trembling hands and opened it. Inside lay a simple braided leather necklace holding a small, smooth river stone. It wasn't diamonds or gold. It was the stone he had given her when they were 16, sitting by the river long before he was king, promising her that they would be together forever. It was her most prized possession. She had left it behind. Cassian fell to his knees in the empty room, clutching the small stone to his chest as a jagged, broken sob finally tore from his throat, echoing through the empty halls of a kingdom that suddenly meant absolutely nothing. The convoy of sleek, black SUVs cut through the dense fog surrounding the Bloodmoon estate, their headlights carving harsh yellow beams into the gloom. 2 days had passed since Cassian found the river stone, and he had not slept a single minute. His reflection in the study window showed a man hollowed out, Heavy dark circles bruised the skin beneath his golden eyes, and his jaw was shadowed with unkempt stubble. He adjusted the cuffs of his tailored black suit, the fabric feeling like a straitjacket. Today was the day Princess Seraphina of the Eastern Lycans arrived. The political alliance he had traded his soul for was pulling up to his front steps. "Alpha," Marcus said, stepping into the room. The beta looked exhausted, bearing the weight of running the pack while his king spiraled. "They are in the courtyard." Cassian gave a single tight nod. He slipped the small river stone into his trouser pocket. It was a pathetic gesture, holding onto a ghost, but the smooth surface against his fingers was the only thing keeping his inner wolf from clawing its way out of his chest and destroying the room. He descended the grand staircase with mechanical precision. Lord Silas and the Elder Council were already waiting by the mahogany doors, practically salivating at the prospect of the royal merger. Silas shot Cassian a warning glare, silently commanding the king to stand tall. Cassian ignored him. The doors opened. The crisp, damp air of the courtyard swept in, carrying a scent of crushed pine and winter frost. Princess Seraphina stepped out of the lid vehicle. She was undeniably striking, tall, statuesque, with hair the color of spun moonlight and eyes like chips of glacial ice. She wore a tailored white coat that dragged against the wet pavement, flanked by 4 massive lichen guards. She did not look like a woman coming to find love. She looked like a general inspecting a newly conquered fortress. Cassian stepped forward, offering his hand. "Princess Seraphina, welcome to the Bloodmoon territory." Seraphina took his hand. Her grip was iron firm. There was no spark, no sudden rush of warmth, just the cold collision of 2 dominant predators assessing each other. Her ice blue eyes scanned his face, lingering on the dark circles and the rigid, unnatural set of his shoulders. She inhaled deeply, her delicate nose twitching. A flicker of something, disgust, pity, crossed her pristine features. "Alpha Cassian," she replied, her voice smooth and chilled. She leaned in closer, dropping her voice so only he could hear. "Your estate is beautiful, but the air here is heavy. It smells of morning, or perhaps a fresh corpse." Cassian's jaw ticked. Lycans had senses that dwarfed even an alpha werewolf's. She could smell the decay of the broken bond radiating off his skin. "The weather has been poor," Cassian replied stiffly, offering his arm. Seraphina did not take it. She walked past him, her guards falling into step behind her. "I detest small talk, Cassian. Let us hope your hospitality is warmer than your pack's aura." The welcome dinner was an agonizing affair. Sitting at the head of the impossibly long banquet table, Cassian stared at his plate of rare venison. It looked like ash. Across from him, Silas was engaging Seraphina in aggressive, sycophantic diplomacy, outlining the trade routes and military advantages their union would bring. Cassian's wolf was screaming. Being in close proximity to another female alpha while mourning a mate was a biological violation. His skin burned. Every time Seraphina spoke, his beast snarled, "Wrong voice, wrong scent, not ours." He gripped the edge of the heavy oak table to stop his hands from shaking. A loud, sharp crack echoed through the dining hall. The conversation died instantly. Silas froze. Seraphina raised an elegant eyebrow. Cassian looked down. He had gripped the table so hard he had snapped off a thick chunk of the ancient wood. His knuckles were bleeding. The physical toll of the severing was destroying his restraint. "Excuse me," Cassian rasped, standing up so abruptly his chair tipped backward, crashing onto the stone floor. He didn't look at any of them. He turned and walked out of the hall, the silence he left behind thicker and far more dangerous than before. Rain lashed against the greasy front window of Maggie's diner. It was past midnight and the neon open sign buzzed with a frantic dying energy. Lisa wiped down the linoleum counter. The rhythmic squeak of her rag, the only sound in the empty restaurant. She liked the quiet. The human world was delightfully dull. There were no psychic whispers, no dominating auras, no expectations. For 3 weeks she had been a ghost named Leah, working double shifts, counting her tips and sleeping dreamlessly in a cheap motel room 2 blocks away. "All right, Leah, honey," Maggie said, emerging from the back kitchen with her purse slung over her shoulder, jingling a ring of keys. "Fryer's off, register's balanced, so let's lock this joint up." "Go ahead, Maggie," Lisa smiled, a genuine, albeit tired expression. "I'll finish the salt shakers and lock the deadbolt behind me." "You work too hard, girl. You're running from something, ain't you?" Maggie patted Lisa's cheek softly. It was a motherly gesture that made Lisa's chest ache with a sudden, sharp pang of nostalgia for her own mother, long gone. "Just a bad breakup," Lisa lied smoothly. "Well, his loss is my clean countertop's gain," Maggie chuckled, pulling her umbrella open. "Night, sweetie." The bell above the door jingled as Maggie stepped out, but the door didn't close. A heavy, calloused hand caught the frame. 2 men pushed their way inside, bringing a gust of freezing rain and the harsh smell of wet dog, stale beer, and metallic oxidized blood. Lisa froze, her hand still holding the rag. Her human disguise felt instantly fragile. They weren't humans, they were rogues. Lone wolves without a pack, driven half mad by isolation. They looked rough, their clothes torn, eyes darting with paranoid energy. They must have been pushed out of the Western Territories by the recent Bloodmoon border lockdowns. "We're closed," Lisa said, keeping her voice even, devoid of any challenge. She kept her eyes averted, playing the submissive human. The larger of the two, a man with a jagged scar across his throat, grinned, revealing yellowed canines. "Come on, sweetheart, kitchen's still warm. We want all the meat you got. And open that register." "I don't have the key," Lisa said, slowly reaching beneath the counter, her fingers brushing the cold steel of the emergency baseball bat Maggie kept there. It wouldn't do much against a werewolf, but it was something. The second rogue, thinner but twitchy, lunged forward, grabbing Lisa by the apron strings and violently yanking her over the counter. She hit the linoleum hard, the breath knocking from her lungs. "Don't lie to us, human," the scarred man barked, stepping toward her. As she hit the floor, survival instinct, honed by years of brutal training in the Bloodmoon barracks, overrode her desire to hide. Her dormant wolf, angry and protective, flared to life in the back of her mind. The thin rogue reached down to grab her hair. Lisa didn't cower. She grabbed his wrist, twisting it with a vicious, fluid motion while driving her boot directly into his kneecap. A sickening snap echoed in the diner. The man howled in pain, collapsing. The scarred man's eyes widened, flashing a sudden glowing amber. He realized his mistake. "You're not human." He lunged at her, his hands shifting into claws. Lisa rolled backward, kicking a metal stool directly into his path. As he stumbled, she sprang up, using the momentum to deliver a devastating, concentrated palm strike to his sternum. It was a warrior's strike, designed to stop a shifting wolf in its tracks. The impact sent him crashing through a wooden booth, splintering the table in half. Lisa stood over them, her chest heaving, her eyes burning with a pale, fierce light. She didn't shift, she didn't have the pack energy reserves to do so safely, but the aura of a trained, lethal pack warrior rolled off her in waves. "Get out," she whispered, her voice layered with a dangerous guttural hum. "If I ever see your faces in this town again, I will tear your throats out with my teeth. Run!" Terrified, the two rogues scrambled to their feet, the thin one dragging his broken leg, and burst out into the storm. Lisa stood alone amidst the wrecked diner. Her adrenaline spiked, then crashed. She looked at her trembling hands. By defending herself, she had ignited her aura. For a brief, shining moment, her supernatural scent had spiked in the atmosphere like a flare in the dark. She had to leave. Tonight. Cassian stood on the balcony of his chambers, letting the freezing rain soak through his ruined white dress shirt. The cold was the only thing that grounded him. His knuckles were wrapped in thick bandages. A soft knock sounded at his door. Before he could answer, it opened. Princess Seraphina stepped in, shedding her white coat. Underneath, she wore a simple dark silk dress. She locked the door behind her and activated a small silver device on the table, a jammer that blocked werewolf hearing outside the room. "Stop looking at the trees, Cassian. They won't bring her back," Seraphina said. Cassian turned, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "You overstepped, Princess, and you are bleeding out on your own throne," she shot back, walking over and pouring herself a glass of water, ignoring the alcohol. She took a sip and leveled her icy gaze at him. "I know what you did. I can smell the severed bond. It's rotting you from the inside out." Cassian stiffened. He expected a reprimand. He expected her to demand the mating ceremony happen immediately to secure her position. Instead, Seraphina set the glass down. "I am not going to mate with you, Cassian." The words hit him like a physical blow, snapping him out of his grief-dazed stupor. "What? Did you really think I would bind myself and my people to an alpha who is actively dying of a broken heart?" Seraphina asked, her tone pragmatic, devoid of malice. "A mate bond is a sacred biological anchor. You shattered yours for a political alliance. That doesn't make you a strong king, Cassian. It makes you a liability. My father sent me to secure the East, not to babysit a crumbling sovereign." Cassian stared at her. The council's entire plan, the reason he had looked Lisa in the eye and destroyed both of their lives, was disintegrating before him. "Silas will view this as an act of war," Cassian managed to say, his voice hollow. "Let him," Seraphina scoffed. "Silas is a parasite. He manipulated you. He wanted a Luna he could control, because he knew he could never control a warrior born of the barracks. I will return to the East tomorrow. I suggest you find your mate and beg her for forgiveness before your pack turns on you." She deactivated the jammer, unlocked the door, and left without another word. Cassian collapsed onto the edge of his bed, burying his face in his hands. A hysterical, broken laugh escaped his lips. It was all for nothing. The rejection, the pain, the empty kingdom, all for absolutely nothing. Deep in the lower levels of the pack house, in a soundproof strategy room, Lord Silas sat in the dark, a phone pressed to his ear. He had not heard Seraphina's conversation with Cassian, but he didn't need to. He had seen the way the princess looked at the king at dinner. He knew the alliance was on the brink of collapse. Cassian's lingering attachment to the outcast was a poison infecting the entire regime. As long as Lisa lived, Cassian would never fully bond with another. "Speak," Silas commanded into the phone. On the other end, a static-laced voice replied. It was Silas's personal mercenary, a tracker operating completely off the official pack books. "I'm in a human town near the Rockies. Had a local supernatural flare a few hours ago. 2 rogues got their asses kicked by a waitress. The description matches the girl." Silas's eyes gleamed coldly in the dim light. She was alive, and she had exposed herself. "The king is unwell," Silas said softly, spinning a silver pen between his fingers. "He suffers from a phantom limb, a psychological delusion that prevents him from leading." "Your orders, my lord?" A phantom limb cannot ache if it is definitively cauterized, Silas said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Do not bring her back. Make it look like a rogue attack. End her and burn the body. Consider it done. The line went dead. Silas smiled in the dark, confident he was saving the kingdom. Miles away, Cassian, still sitting on the edge of his bed, suddenly gasped. He clutched his chest, a sharp, icy panic piercing his heart out of nowhere. The bond was gone, but the instinct remained. Something was hunting her. Lisa threw her sparse belongings into her duffel bag, her hands moving with frantic, practiced efficiency. The flashing red neon light from the motel sign outside bled through the cheap plastic blinds, painting her pale skin in harsh, bloody strokes. She had 15 minutes. The cops would eventually find the broken bodies of the two rogues in the diner, and she could not afford to be questioned. More pressingly, she knew the supernatural energy she had unleashed would attract worse things than local law enforcement. She zipped the bag shut and reached for her father's hunting knife, sliding it into the leather sheath at her thigh. Suddenly, the hair on the back of her neck stood up. The air in the tiny, cramped motel room dropped 10 degrees. The rhythmic drumming of the rain against the window pane seemed to vanish, replaced by a suffocating, unnatural vacuum. It wasn't a rogue, it was a professional. Lisa didn't turn around. She dropped the duffel bag and dove forward just as the motel door exploded inward, ripped entirely off its hinges in a shower of splintered wood and twisted metal. A massive figure stepped through the debris. He was clad in dark tactical gear, rainwater slicking off his broad shoulders. His eyes glowed a dull, muddy crimson. A wolf who had severed his own humanity for coin. Silas sends his regards, the mercenary rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. He lunged. Lisa rolled across the worn carpet, grabbing the heavy bedside lamp and hurling it at his head. He shattered it with a casual swipe of his forearm, not even breaking stride. He was too fast, fueled by the dark magic of his illicit enhancements. Lisa sprang to her feet, drawing her knife. Without the ambient energy of a pack bond to fuel her supernatural speed and strength, she was fighting at half capacity. Every movement felt like moving through deep water. The mercenary swung a heavy, silver-plated combat knife. Lisa parried the blow, the metals clashing with a harsh screech, but the sheer force of his strike sent a shockwave up her arm, numbing her fingers. He followed up with a brutal kick to her ribs. She heard a sickening crack and flew backward, crashing through the flimsy bathroom door. Pain flared, sharp and blinding, but she didn't scream. She scrambled backward against the cold porcelain of the bathtub, her breathing ragged. The mercenary stepped into the doorway, his silhouette blocking out the red neon light. He twirled the silver blade in his hand. Nothing personal, little Luna, he sneered, just cleaning up the king's mess. He raised the blade, preparing for the killing strike. 100 miles away, Cassian's black SUV tore down the wet asphalt at 140 miles an hour. His eyes were entirely gold, his inner wolf driving the vehicle with supernatural reflexes. The phantom ache in his chest had suddenly morphed into a blinding, searing agony. Ribs broken, silver nearby. He could feel the echo of her trauma through the severed thread of their souls. "Hold on," he roared into the empty car, the steering wheel cracking under his death grip. "Hold on." Back in the motel, Lisa closed her eyes, raising her hunting knife in a desperate final guard. She prepared for the searing burn of silver. It never came. A deafening crash shook the entire building as the exterior wall of the motel room violently imploded. Bricks, drywall, and shattered glass rained down like shrapnel. Before the dust could even settle, a blur of pure, terrifying shadow shot through the debris. The mercenary didn't even have time to turn his head. Cassian slammed into the assassin with the force of a falling meteor. The impact threw both men out of the bathroom and into the main room, destroying the bed in a shower of splinters and feathers. Cassian didn't use a weapon. He didn't need to. He was a king, and his mate was bleeding. The mercenary scrambled to recover, bringing his silver knife up, but Cassian caught the man's wrist. With a sickening, effortless twist, Cassian snapped the assassin's arm completely backward. The man howled, dropping the blade. Cassian grabbed the mercenary by the throat, hoisting him 3 feet into the air. The king's face was a mask of primal, unadulterated nightmare. His fangs were fully descended. "You dared," Cassian whispered, a sound so dark it made the shadows in the room seem to physically recoil. "You dared to touch what is mine." With a brutal singular motion, Cassian crushed the mercenary's windpipe and hurled his lifeless body through the shattered window into the parking lot. Silence descended on the ruined room, broken only by the sound of the rain and Lisa's harsh, shallow breathing. Cassian stood amidst the wreckage, his chest heaving, his hands stained with the mercenary's blood. The ferocious, blinding rage of his inner beast slowly receded, replaced immediately by a crushing wave of terror. He turned slowly toward the ruined bathroom. Lisa was using the sink to pull herself up. Her left arm hung uselessly at her side, her face pale and dotted with plastered dust, but her eyes, those sharp dark eyes that had haunted his every waking moment for the past 3 weeks, were clear, and they were fixed on him. "Lisa," Cassian breathed, the name tearing from his throat like a prayer. He took a desperate step forward, his hands reaching out to pull her into his chest, to smell her, to assure his frantic wolf that she was alive. "Don't," Lisa commanded. Her voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a quiet, absolute authority that stopped the Alpha King dead in his tracks. She winced, clutching her broken ribs, and limped out of the bathroom. She didn't look at the mercenary's body. She looked at Cassian, her gaze sweeping over his ruined clothes, his panicked eyes, the dark circles of exhaustion on his face. "You're bleeding," Cassian said, his voice trembling. "Let me heal you, please." "A pack healer can set the ribs," Lisa replied, her tone horribly, terrifyingly polite. "I'll survive." "Lisa, I was wrong," Cassian said, the words spilling out of him in a desperate torrent. The proud king shattered, falling to his knees amidst the debris of the motel room. He looked up at her, his golden eyes shining with unshed tears. "I was so wrong. The alliance, Seraphina rejected the union, but even before that I knew. The moment you crossed the border, my soul started rotting. I chose fear. I chose politics. I was a coward. I beg you, Lisa, forgive me. Come back to me." Lisa looked down at him. There was no triumph in her eyes. There was no joy at seeing the man who broke her heart groveling at her feet. There was only a profound, weary sadness. "Get up, Cassian," she said softly. He didn't move. "Not until you say you'll come back." "You want me back because your political safety net vanished?" she asked, a bitter edge finally creeping into her voice. "Because the Lycan princess saw what I saw. A king too weak to stand by his own convictions?" Cassian flinched as if struck. "No, I want you back because I am nothing without you, because you are my mate." "I was your mate," Lisa corrected him, the words slicing through the room with surgical precision. "You severed that bond, Cassian. You stood in your study and ripped my soul out of my chest because Silas told you to. You didn't break my heart, you broke my trust. And a bond can be reforged, but trust cannot." Cassian lowered his head, a choked sob escaping his lips. He knew she was right. "I won't be your Luna," Lisa continued, stepping past him to retrieve her duffel bag from the rubble. "I won't share a bed with a man who looked me in the eye and discarded me when it was convenient. Cassian closed his eyes, the absolute finality of her words sealing his doom. However, Lisa said, turning back to him, her eyes hardening into obsidian, she gestured to the window where the mercenary had been thrown. That man was wearing the black steel insignia of the Alpha Council. Silas sent him to kill me. Cassian's head snapped up, a fresh wave of murderous intent washing over his features. You want to make this right, Cassian? Lisa asked, her voice ringing with the steel of a warrior. Then you will take me back to Bloodmoon, not as your mate, but as a free wolf, and you will help me tear Silas off his pedestal. Cassian looked at the woman standing before him, battered, bruised, entirely without the supernatural backing of a pack, yet radiating more power and royalty than any Lycan princess he had ever met. He stood up, wiping the blood from his jaw, a dark, solemn fire igniting in his eyes. As you command. The morning sun struggled to pierce the heavy gray clouds hanging over the Bloodmoon estate. In the grand hall, Lord Silas sat at the polished oak table, sipping imported tea. The council murmured anxiously around him about the king's sudden disappearance the night before, but Silas felt a warm, comfortable satisfaction in his chest. By now the deed was done, the distraction was eliminated. Cassian would return broken but moldable. The heavy iron-wrought doors of the grand hall did not open, they exploded. The ancient wood splintered inward with the force of a bomb, sending heavy oak shards skittering across the marble floor. The council members shrieked, scrambling backward from the table. Through the dust and the morning mist, Cassian walked in. He was covered in dried blood and brick dust, his eyes burning with a lethal, predatory gold. But it wasn't the king who made Silas drop his porcelain teacup, shattering it against the floor. It was the woman walking beside him. Lisa wore Cassian's oversized jacket over her bloody shirt, her arm bound tightly to her chest in a makeshift sling. She was injured, exhausted, but her chin was tilted upward. She walked with the terrifying, unbothered grace of a predator who had cornered its prey. Cassian stopped at the head of the table. With a sickening thud, he tossed a heavy burlap sack onto the polished wood. It rolled, stopping right in front of Silas. The top fell open, revealing the lifeless, bloodied face of Silas's personal mercenary. The grand hall fell into a dead, horrifying silence. Treason, Cassian's voice boomed, amplified by his alpha aura, shaking the very foundations of the pack house. Silas's face drained of all color. He stuttered, trying to stand. Alpha, Cassian, this is a misunderstanding. That rogue was your personal attack dog, Lisa interrupted, her voice cutting through the hall like a whip. He confessed before he died, Silas. It was a lie. But watching the color drain entirely from the elder's face proved her point. Cassian stepped forward, grabbing Silas by the lapels of his immaculate suit and hauling him over the table, scattering paperwork and spilling hot tea. You manipulated my counsel, you poisoned my judgment, and you ordered the assassination of an innocent wolf, a woman who is 1,000 times the leader you will ever be. Cassian snarled, his fangs grazing Silas's cheek. I did it for the pack, Silas shrieked, thrashing uselessly in the king's grip. She was weak. She was a peasant. She is a warrior, Cassian roared. He dropped Silas to the floor, towering over the pathetic, sniveling man. He projected his voice so every wolf within a mile of the estate could hear his decree. I, Alpha King Cassian, strip you of your rank, your title, and your lands. You are banished from the Bloodmoon territories. If I ever catch your scent on my borders, I will not bother with a trial. Domesii guards immediately surged forward, grabbing Silas by his arms and dragging the screaming, protesting elder out of the grand hall. The remaining council members fell to their knees, bowing their heads in absolute submission to the terrifying display of their king's wrath. Cassian didn't look at them. He turned his back on the power he had once sacrificed everything for, and looked only at Lisa. She stood amidst the wreckage of the doors, the sunlight finally breaking through the heavy clouds outside and catching the dark strands of her hair. "It's done," Cassian said softly, the alpha command fading from his voice, leaving only the raw, vulnerable tone of a man who had lost everything that mattered. "You are safe here. You can have your old quarters. You can have whatever you desire." Lisa looked around the hall at the bowing council, at the blood on the floor, and finally at the king. "I desire to train the new recruits," Lisa said calmly. "I will stay, Cassian. I will fight for my home, but I am not your Luna, and I am not your mate." Cassian swallowed the heavy lump of grief in his throat. He nodded slowly. He knew he didn't deserve a magical reunion. He didn't deserve her instant forgiveness. "I know," Cassian said, his golden eyes locking onto hers with a fierce, unwavering determination. "I broke our bond. I broke your trust." He took a step back, bowing his own head to her, a king yielding to a warrior. "But I have the rest of my life to earn it back." Lisa didn't smile. She didn't run into his arms. But as she turned to leave the hall, she didn't turn her back completely. She glanced over her shoulder just for a fraction of a second before walking away. It wasn't a promise, but it was a start. She accepted his rejection and turned her back is a story that proves the strongest romantic tension doesn't come from a magical bond magically fixing everything, but from the brutal, realistic consequences of betrayal and the slow, arduous path to earning back lost trust. Lisa's refusal to instantly forgive Cassian, choosing her own self-respect over a crown, redefines what it means to be a truly powerful Luna. Cassian's journey from a flawed, politically driven king to a man willing to strip his own power to protect the woman he wronged highlights a deep, meaningful character arc. If you love this grounded, high-stakes take on the werewolf romance genre, please like, share, and subscribe for more intense, dramatic stories where consequences matter and love must be fought for, not just destined. Let us know in the comments if you think Cassian can ever truly win her back.